And we are on the air. Today I am here with 5 other amazing people introducing... Oh, great, I can hear myself. How did I forget not to mute that button? Great. Messed up my whole introduction. Just pretend that didn't happen. That didn't happen. Do not look at the man behind the silver curtain.
It was a fake introduction.
Just for any new viewers, would all of you care to introduce yourselves? Let's start with you, some random geek.
Welcome, Internet, for I and some random geek, Jonathan Michael Scott, the man who's known as Leggings Man, and also the Mighty Tash of the left. Not all self-identified labels and stuff like. Anyway, so not to drag this all on, I am Jonathan Scott. I am a anarchist, a baby anarchist, a intersectional feminist, and non-binary male plus. So he gives my pronouns. So sir, Mr. It's also work, and Jonathan's still my name for now. And I do have a YouTube channel where right now I mostly do just like movie reviews. I like to do some more anime reviews, and I should get around to playing more video games and putting them up on my YouTube channel. And hopefully, maybe, and I'll just stop there before I make promises like I'm going to do video essays too, because
I could go to quote you on that.
Mm-hmm. All right, and now we have Mr.
Matt. That's you.
Yeah, it's Matt. Sorry, I saw the blank icon. I'm like, my mind, it's gone blank.
You're awesome.
Oh yeah, I'm MadMan Matt, and so far you need to know is I have my own channel, and I am starting to do interviews on that. I'm also a communist, not sure what kind, but I'm pretty left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now, probably by far the most famous person on the Hangout, introducing Maria the Witch.
Hello. Yeah, I'm Maria the Witch. I guess I'm a leftist YouTuber, and my country has now just turned fascist, so there's that. Yeah, hi.
And I suppose now we should move on to Lonely Wolf.
Hello. So I'm the other accent here. I feel so well represented here. We've got a few accents. So I'm an eclectic YouTuber. You name it, I've probably made a video about it or done something. So mainly I'm a music channel. So I do my keyboard and piano covers. And then, so occasionally I do other videos, and my co-star is my little cockatiel, who learns to talk and sing.
And last, but certainly not least, Owen Macdonald, would you care to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lapis, for such a nice introduction. I'm Owen Macdonald. I'm a socialist from Britain, if you can't tell. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. I mean, I'm greatly accompanied by these wonderful people. And it's a privilege to be here to celebrate your 200th subscriber, Lapis.
Who are you calling wonderful, boy?
Sorry?
Who are you calling wonderful?
Oh, everyone here.
I feel
have to admit,
insulted.
I was caught out by the fact that you didn't have a profile picture and your profile name is Mr. I was trying to work out who was here.
Yeah, it's Matt.
Well, it's a pleasure to speak to you again, Matt.
Yeah. Maybe
and all
next
of you,
time.
really.
Yeah.
And many more.
Or many more. I just realized I'm the only American on here. Wow.
Yeah. You know, this is a decolonial podcast. We have people from all over the world.
Am I allowed to make a white genocide joke yet?
Go ahead.
All right. First, a few webcasts, and then the world.
I don't know. White genocide is, I think, probably the most hilarious concept I've ever encountered online.
Oh,
And
no.
if it wasn't so deadly, an idea, then it would be, just ludicrous. I mean, how can two people dating possibly be interpreted as an act of aggression and genocide?
I mean, the thing
I
is,
won't
these
get
people,
laid that way.
these people like don't even believe it themselves. I mean, like with most things from the far right, it's more just a propaganda tool. Like the people like Richard Spencer and stuff and all of them. They know they're just talking rubbish, but it's useful to con people into believing your fascist ideas.
Yeah, it's just you'd think that they put a bit more effort into fooling the rank and file, but I suppose then you could say the same for like fundamentalist Christianity.
Well, all you need to con people is capital, isn't it? So.
Yep, there's that. Yes,
And the aesthetic. Fascism is bringing aesthetics into politics, and we communists and socialists must respond by politicizing art.
Hey, red and black is an excellent color combination.
Oh, that reminded me of that ridiculous bit from Sargon's video talking about Antifa and fascists. He's like, well, they're basically fascists because they have a red and black color scheme.
I mean, given the sorry, Matt.
Wasn't he the guy who thought that a parody on fascism was a fantastic liberal paradise?
I think so.
I mean, the Sargon himself, just the any veneer of being left wing is sort of undermined by like 5 seconds of listening to the man. Like he's so, very blatantly right wing, very blatantly enabling fascism. I think it's perfectly rational to call him a fascist because that's the grand accomplishment that he's ever achieved. Just helping the far right normalize their stuff, demonizing the far right's enemies and stuff, making thousands of videos defending all the things they stand for and stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Should I turn my webcam on?
Well, I mean, I think it would be like a disservice to the audience to not let them see your face.
That's a little bit generous.
Not at all.
Let me see if it's working today because it's quite temperamental.
After all, we already got the lovely me, the lovely effeminate degenerate on camera, so there's no such thing as too much lovely on the camera.
Yeah,
is that working?
It is indeed. We can see your fine visage.
Who else I watch? I was watching some of because when some of them are on camera, you got to be careful because then you get distracted a bit. Because who was it? It was this really nice looking woman. I think her name's Gwen.
Oh, Guinevere, or Gwen No Fear.
Oh, yeah, she's awesome.
And
she's awesome.
Yeah, but the hair. I'm just thinking, how do you get it like that? You need to do a tutorial or something.
When no fear, do a tutorial how you do your amazing hair if you're willing to do that, because there is a fan base for just those hair tutorials.
Yeah, maybe there is.
Hey Lappers, I'm sorry. Congratulations for your 200 subscribers, but I'm really not in the mood to celebrate.
Oh, it's completely understandable, Maria. I mean, if you want, we can center this stream around something, more grave. I don't know how to put it.
No,
I'm totally fine with centering your needs.
No, we don't have to do that. Your last attempt at a stream celebration was, quite grave already. I'm not gonna do that. It's all right. Again, just congratulations and thanks for inviting me. Bye, everyone.
Oh, yeah. Well, anyway, Maria, it was lovely having you on. We wish you all the best, You really are an amazing woman.
Mm.
Thank you.
For any context, I think everyone already knows this, but Maria is Brazilian, and her country has just elected the fascist Jair Bolsonaro.
Yep.
Worrying times, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, just the sheer volume of far-right candidates we're seeing across really most of the globe.
Yeah.
You know, it's alarming, but sort of inevitable, really, from a capitalist, economy where capitalists decide to pursue their capital in any means possible, and naturally that's at the cost of the liberties and freedoms of the rest of us.
Yeah, democracy too.
We've also seen that this kind of collapse of neoliberalism has presented opportunities for the left as well, like Jeremy Corbyn in England, Mélenchon in France, Podemos in Spain, even Bernie Sanders in America, although he's more on the Social Democrat side.
Right.
There is still hope. And I think that especially Jeremy Corbyn has shown that a pretty left-wing platform can attain a great deal of popular backing. Most notably, UKIP got about, I think, 12.4% of the popular vote in the 2015 election. But then in 2017, I think it couldn't even break 2%.
Is
Though,
it party of Sargon and Co?
Yes, now Paul Joseph Watson and Sargon are running their media campaign.
And the Nazi big guy, right?
Yeah.
Oh, Tommy Robinson? Is he in the UKIP? Oh no, Nazi pug guy. Yes.
Yeah. Count Dankula. I don't know what his.
He's so cringy. I can't listen to it and take it seriously.
He had a real name. I remember hearing it because he did a hang up with like a Kevin Logan, which was quite interesting. Like, Count Dankula. I just remember the first time I heard him speak, he was on a stream with Destiny, and Count Dankula was saying that, oh, come on, President Trump, he can sue a newspaper that's telling lies about him. And Destiny's like, they're not telling lies. They're just quoting what he's actually saying. Well, that's right? They can still sue him. Do you understand that that he's the president of the United States, not an average citizen? And Destiny made that point like a couple of times. And Count did not seem to get that. So yeah, so that's still my impression of Count Dankula. He seems like a sweet guy, which doesn't say much, unfortunately, but I think he's just not well read on like the issues and stuff like that. That's my opinion.
He was a communist, right?
I don't know.
I heard that he was a communist.
Well, to be fair, in those circles, a communist is basically much like a centrist liberal.
Oh, by the way, I'm on a lightning storm right now, which is finally caught up from like Portland. My friends were driving through it as it happened. So if you see me disappear, that's probably that. That's happened before. And I was in like an Owen Macdonald hangout when that happened, when I lost power in the middle of a hangout. Anyway.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm kind of sick.
Oh, do you have a cold?
Yes.
Oh, I see. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Owen, are you enjoying a nice cup of cocoa?
It's tea, actually.
Of course it is.
I was about to make myself a cup of coffees as well.
It's really nice, tea and coffee and all of them. What was I going to say?
Tea.
Tea too.
Sorry,
What
Matt?
kind of tea?
Just tea. Normal tea.
Okay, that's a good question. What is normal tea to a British person?
You dare to drink it out of a mug and
English breakfast tea?
Earl
So
Grey.
you all
I'm like, how dare you drink it out of a mug? You're supposed to drink it out of those little saucers, like as an Englishman. It's like I've been telling people that the English have been lecturing Australian for years about how to drink tea.
Well, let's just say
the tea is piping hot.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always been interested in Australia. It seems like such a strange country, all sorts of strange wildlife, and a huge amount of contrast between the conditions of the the settlers and the conditions of the native inhabitants.
I mean, it's actually I'll let Wolf start, seeing as he is actually Australian.
Yeah, it's one of those. I think I heard a description from New Zealanders. They sort of consider it's sort of like low key. I guess casual racism is a very big term. It's like political correctness is very not really well observed in this country. For the most part, like most states or whatever, but they're still pretty much. It's okay. Mostly the politics is centrist. I mean, it's hard to sort of see a difference between the Liberal or the Labor parties, what they do.
Because they're so off to the right, really. I mean, the country, like, they literally had, like, essentially slavery. Well, not really slavery, but they were like abducting Aboriginal children as recently as the 1970s. Their politicians are so skewered to the right that like Wolf said, they're both parties seem so similar because they basically are. They're both very conservative. They've got these awful. What's that woman called? The really conservative, like First Nation one. Yeah, there you go. Her. Yeah, people like her who just get to been around for decades. It seems just saying the same stuff.
And I didn't she target a little girl when she was refusing to sing the national anthem?
Oh yes, that's it.
Yeah, because the first time I just thought it was a standard practice to sort of do that, but then if you look at the discrimination laws or whatever, there are this sounds really weird, but there are specific religions, I think Jehovah's Witness or something like that, one of those religions where it's singing and the anthem is looked down upon by that religion. So it doesn't even matter. I mean, it's just a freedom of expression. I mean, if you want to sing it, but if you don't, then don't.
They also Australia have also been cheating at cricket recently.
Yes.
You've got to get a real priorities in order here.
The cricket, the captain of Australia, and their best batsman and one of the younger fielders, they brought on sandpaper onto the pitch to wax down the ball to make it better grip in the hand. And obviously because it's a cricket game against England, it's being televised, so everyone sees it. And it's not even the ICC don't act, which is the governing board of cricket. They only give them a few demerit points, which are essentially the same as they're warnings, you can't get a certain amount of them. It's
embarrassing when they do that sort of thing, and we did it to New Zealand as well when we bowled underarm or something like that to win a match. It was a big
I remember. Well, I don't remember that, but yeah, they because in cricket you're meant to bowl overarm and you have to have a specific way of bowling. But at that point they hadn't written rules fully, so you technically you could still bowl the ball really slowly and get away with it. So on the last ball of a game, when I think they needed 4 or 6 runs to win, so essentially they had to hit the ball to the boundary rope. The bowler just threw it at him underarm. So there's no speed in the ball. You're not going to get it anywhere, and the game was won. And it's a shame because Australia, they produced some fantastic cricket players. I could talk all day about cricket, to be honest. I'm sure it's not the most interesting.
Yeah, and as the American in the room, I can say this is okay. This tells you how well America knows things. Because in my 7th grade cultural awareness project, I covered cricket. I chose cricket as my project. I think I did well on that. But as that was 20 years ago, Yeah, I don't remember a single thing. So here I'm listening to like bowling, and it's just like, wait a minute, it's just like kind of like pitching in baseball and stuff like that. And I'm thinking that's because that's my references and trying to think, and so I'm fumbling wrong. It's like I think I know what Owen is talking about, but I would just like bring that up in case like other Americans who don't know.
Yeah,
It's very similar. Like pitching, obviously, like the ball doesn't touch the ground, whereas in bowling, it it can either it has to be like in baseball, pitched between the shoulders and the knees.
Yes.
Otherwise it's a no ball. However, in cricket, the ball can obviously be bounced, and you tend to use the actual wear of the pitch to, deliver the ball. And obviously, in cricket, you stay in for as many runs as you can get before you lose your wicket. Whereas in baseball, you get a home run and then you've got your point. I mean, obviously, as I'm used to seeing cricket, I much prefer cricket. Baseball, just like it's all right, but it's the scores are so low during the games because of how well the bowling teams tend to do, like 4-3 after like 7 rounds or whatever.
9 innings, 3 hours, and yes, the only reason in order to like actually get into baseball, you have to like actively get like the score sheet. Okay, they got a single, they got like a ball, they got like 2 runners on, that guy sold the base, so like fill out like a notepad or something like that, or a score sheet and stuff like that. Which to others who don't like baseball, that looks like work, and totally fair. Because otherwise, what do you do as you're watching baseball? I guess get drunk. Because, I cannot explain to you why. I can't explain to you if for people who are stats geeks, they love baseball because it's one of the longest seasons and there's 160 games and it's like a stat-ridden season. Stat-ridden game. Unlike
the thing is,
like basketball, unlike football, unlike handmade American football.
Thing is, though, I love stats, and I'm sure I would get into baseball, if I was American. Because in America,
I don't watch sport.
Honestly, my position on sports is that you either play them or you don't watch them or don't interact. What's the point of doing of spending so much time observing something that you're not actually participating in?
Fancy sport.
I couldn't disagree more, Lapis. It's it's entertainment. It's it's hard to explain because with sport, like with anything, it's a lot of it is down to your personal enjoyment of the thing. It's how much you connect with a thing, which is why football or soccer, for those of you who don't use football, it's it's the beautiful game. It's something that is always going to be of massive interest because it's it's a beautiful sport. Cricket, tennis, there aren't many others which I would say are anywhere near that passionate for me, but certainly football. Like I could talk about football through this whole length of this podcast, not podcast, hangout. It's
I listen to these kind of hangouts at work like a podcast, so it's like
Same there.
But it's while one person sees sport as perhaps play it or it's not that interesting, in many ways it's immersive just being in the vicinity of the game, watching it, seeing it, talking about it, and for me just it's like I said, it's a beautiful game, and actually I find that with football in particular, it actually makes a really good case for one element of society that capitalism has really ruined. I mean, I could go into depth about the way football has been so corrupted by money and how many people have suffered because of the introduction of capital and the commodification of the system.
Something is incorruptible under capitalism.
Sorry, Matt?
Nothing is incorruptible under capitalism. Everything
exactly.
Everything has to become a commodity. That's the end goal, right? Make as much money as possible.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think because with football, because it's such a passionate thing. It's such a the origins were just in sport. It's particularly galling. Like you can in many ways, the football becomes the pride of the community. It's a massive, oh yeah, let's go and support the local team. Let's go and go to our stadium where we're going to see our team play with our fans. And capitalism takes that, and you get this soulless, horrible experience where you've got a stadium, but it's too much to enter. So loads of local fans are priced out. You've got a team, but the players, like, they don't care about the club. They've just been brought in on a massive salary. The owners don't put anything back into the club. They just use it as essentially like a pretty trinket. They run up the club's debts, and then when it gets too much, they leave and take that. Their money's fine, but then the club's ruined. The club has millions in debt, and then they get at best case they fall down the table a bit. Worst case, they get liquidated, and they have to start again from tier 20 or whatever it is in this country. I could talk for hours about just the different examples of this, but
here in America it's not too different. Because I think this is still the common practice for any city that wants a new baseball team or a new professional team whatsoever, or wants to keep their existing team in the city that they're based in right now. It's still a common thing where it's the team owners want the states or wants the governments to pay for half or most of the new construction of the new baseball stadium and stuff like that, but yet the team owners gets all the profits out of the ticket sales for using that venue and stuff like that. So yeah, and then John Oliver last week tonight did two videos or two stories on just the FIFA World Cup and how they forced those countries to build up those giant stadiums and to host the World Cup. And then after the World Cup is gone, that's a big, giant, expensive stadium that the country paid for. That's now, like the one in Brazil, all they're using it for now is just a parking lot to store buses. And also
you should do a collab video, anti-capitalist football.
Well, in my dream life, maybe not dream life, but in my in some sort of an idea I had would be going around the country and talking to different fans about the way their local club had been affected, because literally in the UK, any city you pick, basically it's going to have clubs that have been ruined by either greedy owners or the terrible system. But yeah, like you said, you're absolutely right. The most recent World Cups, maybe not Russia, but to be fair, even Russia, but Brazil and South Africa, countries which they're not in the first world, they're not super rich, but they've essentially been told, oh, you've got to foot the bill for our great football party, which we're going to enjoy, but then afterwards you're going to pay for it. The facilities aren't going to be available to the actual people who built them and are living there. The average South African or Brazilian isn't going to be able to afford the £90. Well, it's not even that; it'd be more because it's obviously dollars over there. But it's really unfair. Not on top of that, you got the Brazilian government putting austerity upon their citizens, but suddenly they've got the money to afford a massive football stadium, especially in Brazil. I'm sure Maria would be more able to speak about this, but the amount of police brutality in the favelas and aimed at the working class in Brazil is atrocious.
And sadly it's only going to get worse now because
exactly. But the money that they didn't have to pay for these stadiums, the rich aren't going to but suffer for it. Coca-Cola and McDonald's have made their money,
or Budweiser.
The cost is given to the Brazilian public, who will be punished with more austerity, more privatization, the Amazon being bulldozed by Bolsonaro. What's his name?
Jair Bolsonaro.
A fascist who's going to ruin things for millions of people. In South Africa, the effects of apartheid still live on.
And it's really the fault of the status quo that he was able to get elected in the first place. The status quo in Brazil was, it's Latin America in general has a massive problem with income inequality, but it's especially bad in Brazil. And not only that, parts of it, are you might as well be living in some sort of resort or in a ritzy part of LA, but other parts of Brazil, are living in, desperate, poor conditions. And the politicians that have been in power, recently have been pretty much the entire political establishment of Brazil has been implicated in this massive scandal called the car wash, or I think it's like the Lavo Jato in Portuguese. I probably butchered that. Sorry to any Portuguese viewers. But essentially, it was using the public oil company, one of Brazil's largest public assets, was used to launder a ton of money to all sorts of politicians' private bank accounts.
Yeah, it's dreadful. Sorry, were you going to continue?
Yeah, well, basically, pretty much every political party in Brazil was caught up in that, and that made the Brazilian people feel outraged, and it sent the economy into a recession. This whole complicated process of trying to discover, okay, which politician is not crooked and which are. And the recent president of Brazil, Michael Temer, has just been complete neoliberal, complete going along with the clear cutting of the Amazon, complete privatization, deregulation. He's a very wealthy man himself, and even though there was live footage of him accepting a bribe from another billionaire, he wasn't impeached like his leftist predecessor, Dilma Rousseff. So obviously, the perfect conditions for the rise of fascism. You have recession, political corruption. You have people who have no faith in their institutions.
Disenfranchisement of people. The many people who were not given a proper left-wing option, because like you just said, neoliberals, like even Dilma Rousseff, like to call her left-wing, it's hardly like, I mean, no, nothing against you, Lapis. Obviously, like she's not left-wing in the sense that she actually, has left-wing values. It's more just left in terms of the spectrum in relativity in Brazil.
Yeah.
In the same way that you wouldn't call people like Ed Miliband or Tony Blair particularly left-wing.
Yeah, well, the left of the accepted spectrum, I suppose
exactly.
You might say. She's a kind of corrupt social democrat, Dilma Rousseff.
Yeah. Then you've got millions who just won't be able to vote simply through, or won't be able to vote in a meaningful way because of the way democracy is so stunted under capitalist situations where capital itself can just outbuy the votes as per the system. Capital is what the system runs on, therefore those with capital are always going to be able to have the extra say.
Well, another problem in Brazil is that the politics are somewhat fragmented among many parties. Now, I'm a big believer in democracy, but in Brazil there are 26 different parties with sizable seats, and that's excluding independents, and that's only in parliament, and you have different margins in the Senate. That's tons and tons of different factions you're going to have to negotiate with in order to get anything passed and executed. So that's, it's pretty much political gridlock. And once again, that's another perfect condition that led to the rise of, say, Mussolini and Hitler.
Well, I would actually slightly disagree with that, because there is obviously voting in blocks, but there is block voting, which you can have in proportional representation, and the rise of Hitler and Mussolini happened for obviously more reasons than just because the voting system was easier to manipulate. I think what is important to notice is that just like in those countries, the far left have been nullified in many ways by the police states. The attacks on Antifa and communist leaders and stuff. Not leaders per se, but
Communist Party
groups.
So growing during the time of Hitler.
Yes, the KPD. But the centrists didn't want to work with them. They're like, oh, well, we have fascists who might want to get rid of the Jews on one hand, but those communists, they want to take away our money. Obviously, we know who's more important.
Exactly. And then Hitler's like, he framed the Reichstag fire on the communists because,
Oh yeah, it was
allegedly,
a false flag.
yeah, allegedly, one person who was a communist did it. Just rubbish, isn't it? You just you don't have to.
Oh,
have
it was
much deductive
discovered like
skills.
years later that it was definitely Hitler's men. It's
Yeah.
completely a false flag. Pretty obvious one too.
And then Hitler uses that to just strike off, cast off the Communist Party from the ballot and the Social Democrats, imprisons all their standing members and leaders and stuff. And look at that. Suddenly, it's easy to win a majority because you've just eliminated half the votes, basically. And look at them.
Show you anyway.
Sorry.
I mean, it was also during the time that the Nazis weren't even the majority. They still gained seats because they were working together with centrists.
Well, yeah, exactly. Right. When you got liberals who will literally say, "Oh, let's just put him in as chancellor. We'll control him. Don't worry, guys." It's just the worst. It's living proof, but maybe not living proof, but certainly an example of why liberalism. It's just why compromising with the far right just is never the right way to go about things. You can't compromise with fascists ever.
Yeah.
Unless you have capital.
Well, even then, I mean, just look at people who had capital, but then shortly lost it because they were part of the Untermensch. Granted, the capitalists obviously were benefit. They did benefit on the long run, but I'm sure there were some
capitalists
Jewish
of a certain kind.
Yeah, exactly.
Targeted, but those weren't the ones necessarily supporting fascism to begin with.
Yep.
And really, obviously, right-wing ideas as a whole, because obviously far-right ideas are just the natural succession of right-wing ideas. It's the endless pursuit of capital, the uninterfered pursuit of commodities and power leads to bigotry and nationalism being utilized as a result of that. And while obviously not all right-wing people are fascists, fascism itself is the consequence of right-wing ideas, and it's important to not just oppose fascism but recognize where it grows from and where it stems from.
Which is why when I saw this a handy fascism checklist, I immediately shared it on my Twitter. Powerful continuing nationalism, identifying enemy scapegoats as unifying cause, rampant sexism, controlling mass media, blah blah blah, 14 things, and it's just the
only one that Trump hasn't necessarily gotten yet is the mass media. Let's just. Labor power is already somewhat suppressed in America.
Yep.
A lot of these things, conservatives and liberals have done for Trump.
Exactly.
Corporate power protected is, I think, probably the definitive feature of the Trump administration. It's
American capitalism as a whole, really.
Oh yeah. But I think it's just interesting because Trump's administration is uniquely hypocritical, and that it advocates populist rhetoric. In his acceptance speech, he was like, "I'm giving power back to you, the people." And how on earth does he think that he's giving power back to the people by giving huge tax cuts to the rich? He doesn't, because it was just meaningless rhetoric, just like all the populist stuff that came out of his campaign. It wasn't actually real. It was just picked, hand selected, so people of the working class, would feel like someone was looking out for them. Someone cared.
And then it wasn't really even working class people who voted for him.
He won some of those people, but the main thing that got him to power was the middle to upper middle class, especially the white upper to upper middle class. Middle to upper middle class.
Yeah.
Really, that's why people voted for him.
Sorry, Matt?
I mean, he pretty much attacked every other group.
I mean, the alarming thing is how many people, just refuse to acknowledge what's going on around them. They've got this idea that fascism is literally swastikas, literally someone announcing to you, oh, we're going to get rid of everything that's not us, and like just connect the dots fascism, where it's like all just spelled out for you nice and neatly. The complete lack of political analysis that so many people obtain is really alarming. But then it's the consequence of a system that is designed to keep people uninformed and ignorant. Look at the media, where Fox News is the most watched media network in America, and just look at what Fox put on. I think today I shared an image of someone said, if a stranger came to my door and asked for healthcare and food and stuff, I would turn them away and slam the door shut or something.
Yeah. Fox News is such a strange little echo chamber, and I think it's trapped so many Americans in this, this unthinking ideology where they just have contempt for new ideas and for people who don't think like them and for people who aren't like them.
It's the American way, isn't it? The American dream of, if you work hard, someday you'll get your, you'll get your
one day
fortune.
I'll be rich too.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a deliberate sham. And you have to look at the McCarthyism and be a complete crackdown on communists and left-wing thought during the 50s, and the continued assault on unions and labor strikes, and the literal assassination of civil rights leaders and anti-racist activists, and just the history of America literally stemming from segregation, slavery, genocide. Every facet of American culture is a example of how capitalism itself just is destructive and anti-freedom.
It's funny how we're talking so much about America when there's only one American in the chat.
Well, one thing that was like you said about like American exceptionalism and something like that. I think I just wanted to like read off what my older brother, who's also like radical as well as I am, and that what he has said. What can I do? Probably the single most common thought that floats through my mind as I used to finish a task, or when my wife's having a bad day, when I try to like process the latest horrific news. I use it proactively, constructively, empathetically, diplomatically, and expressly hopelessly. What can I do? It's the quintessential American idea, the individual tackling problems himself, our hero taking matters into his own hand, breaking the rules but getting results. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what can I do? He hates that phrase. And like, I'm not going to like paraphrase too much because I don't know how much he wants this like a thing to be public, but I think I'm going to share it on my Twitter eventually, because he hates that phrase because like his anxiety is asking him, what can I do? Yet his depression is saying nothing. And there's a lot of times where you're just like, yeah, what can I do? Do I have the money to do things? Do I have the means to do things? If I have the money, do I have the will to do things? And it always frames it as like one person doing something. What can you, the individual, do? Like you, the individual, what are you doing to help combat climate change? And that totally ignores the systematic problem of how 71% of the carbon emissions in the atmosphere is produced by 100 companies. And so it should be more of what can we do, not what can I do.
No, you're definitely on the right. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Owen.
Likewise, you go ahead, Lapis. It's your stream.
Oh. Well, thank you. No, that's a very important point, Geek, and I think it's constantly shoved, down our throat as children. Modify your lifestyle in this way to fix said social problem. What can you change in your lifestyle to make a change? And I think it's fundamentally kind of missing the point. Not to say that lifestyle changes aren't okay. They are, but they don't necessarily address like the root issue. And I think it comes from a very deliberately crafted framework, because I don't think that capitalism could necessarily sustain itself in an environmentally conscious future where people had to be careful about what they consumed and how they consumed it. And and how people had to be cautious about what resources were being used, because capitalism is all about ever growing consumption, ever expanding your profit margins.
Mhm.
Because we live in a finite world. It's impossible for that to, for production to grow ad infinitum. And I don't know, I find it like a framework, the idea that lifestyle change will save the world, to be something very, I don't know, it's a very liberal framework. It's a very liberal way of looking at the world. Because it's like, how can you as a consumer change your consumption to better reflect what you want? And it forces you to think along the lines of what's already in place rather than imagining alternatives to what we have and what's producing the problems.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
technically, they also have start your own business or something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there was something that I don't know. The one thing that I just can't wrap my head around the just the contradictions that are inherent in the way that in the mindset that currently is there. Because I think because that was part of so much of the anxiety that I've experienced that that made it difficult to me to function as a teacher. Was that I was I thought it would be like an interesting job to work in this. It was this really kind of exclusive kind of private school, and for all this talk about meritocracy and pulling yourself up by the bootstraps, like the corruption that was there, it was like almost like the board was the one that was dictating. So the board usually consists of parents and community or whatever, and they dictate a lot of things. And I was explicitly told, like they were looking through my grading book and they say, oh, you can't fail this student because his dad's on the board. It's like, no, don't fail this student. And then it was like, okay, I had to artificially inflate their grade. And then the lack of personal responsibility, like the parents thought, okay, since I paid for this education, that entitles my kid to succeed. And I was like, no, you have to actually study hard to, get whatever grade you want. And it almost felt like an exploitation of my, I guess I carry around intellectual capital. That's the thing that I'm selling as labor. And it's almost like seeing that getting stolen in something. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but it's almost like the product of
it makes a lot of sense.
My hard-earned, intellectual capital is kind of getting sort of stolen.
Mm-hmm. Like you spent years learning how to
capital.
Sorry, I didn't catch that, Matt.
I didn't. Well, technically, also steal intellectual capital from someone else.
Yeah, it's and it's sort of weird. Like for the talk of meritocracy, the number of parents who they quickly blame the teacher for their child hasn't studied very hard, and like they do what they can, and it just led to so much anxiety by me, almost this like sort of dogpiling of people who are just demanding all these things when all they have to do is just tell their kid just study a bit harder and actually put in the effort.
Because ultimately, it's all a sham. It's an illusion of freedom and of consequence. Because like as you found out, Wolf, these people, they have capital, therefore they expect, as per the system, to just have an easy ride. Therefore, when things don't go according to plan, instead of working on themselves, I say, okay, well, here's my capital should speak for itself. My student should be getting the grade I want them to be. Mm-hmm. Therefore, you're going to inflate it. Like you and Geek were saying a second ago, Lapis. The nonsensical expectancy of individuals who just suddenly save the environment when, as you said, Geek, corporations are destroying the environment. It's deliberate. It's a way of distracting people from the fact that this system is so unsustainable and unjust. There's no decision under this system that is taken without the interest of either protecting capital or expanding capital, be it lying to the populace about the intent of the political decisions, be it artificially inflating people's grades to ensure their future is secure regardless of how hard they've worked for it.
It's in their interest to make certain policies, like especially with like marijuana, like criminalizing marijuana use or any sort of like any certain illicit drugs or whatever, it's sort of, it goes against the interest of say profit of certain pharmaceutical companies who kind of you know, their products, when there's a product out there that has so many different medicinal properties. I mean, I know that like Chairview, like he relies on sort of marijuana because he has muscular dystrophy, so he's like, he often relies on that drug to sort of, you know, to help his muscles out a little bit.
Yeah. And then, you know, not just that, not just the criminalization of drugs, but then the pool of labor in prisons, penal labor that it creates. The idea that you can just have this system, it's free, but you break the law, you're off to prison where it will make you work for $1 an hour, and all of a sudden that explains how the war on drugs, despite being such an obvious wrong, has been sustained for decades now, because Walmart, McDonald's, Nike, Adidas, thousands of other corporations have this massive pool of labor, that they can pay essentially nothing and maximize profits from. Capitalism is this commodification, and until this infection of society is removed, every element of it is going to be subject to this decay, this unfair treatment.
Just a second. I want that. This is a totally off the rails comment, but I noticed that Owen Macdonald pronounced it like Adidas. I always pronounce it Adidas.
Adidas. Does it matter? I mean,
I don't know.
Not really.
You're British. I'm assuming that whatever you're saying is you're saying it correctly. Because as Americans, it's like, wait a minute, Bear Grylls is pronounced it glacier. I always pronounce it glacier. I guess he's right.
I mean, pronunciation is something which is largely subjective. I mean, obviously there are some things which are there's a certain way to pronounce it, but given language is such an evolving, constantly changing thing, I don't see it as too harsh to
yeah, it's just
have
something
different.
But back to the topic, in fact, like how I think in Wolf, he said about like marijuana being criminalized as well as other illicit drugs because big pharma doesn't want that as competition. That may be, but like I think the biggest thing is it was just that. It was for America, at least. It was like in the 1940s or something like that. All these drugs were considered bad drugs, as opposed to opium and alcohol and other stuff like that, merely because of like who was perceived to be the ones who like enjoy it the most was people of color, essentially like that. And so the drug was really just a war to disenfranchise people of color in America. To bring them into the industrial prison system, like Owen said, to have cheap labor per the 13th Amendment, which only abolished slavery for people who did not commit crimes, essentially. Yeah. And what was the other point I was going to bring up? And it was like I was thinking about it. Damn it. Oh, okay. No. Is also kind of like in the prison system or in the police brutality of people of color is almost... Ollie from Philosophy mentioned this in his like excellent video he put out on Friday of like witchcraft, where it's just like it was almost a continuation of like the lynching from like at the end of like the Civil War, where yes, blacks are now free from slavery, but yet there is a systematic system of oppression that like keeps the blacks in their place. Well, they also created like Jim Crow laws and other things like that to keep them in place. But also now with our prison system, we kind of have new Jim Crow laws to keep them in their place, which is so tragic and unfortunate and ties with capitalism.
Yeah, very good points, everyone. The drug war does serve multiple purposes. It's a very useful tool, which is why it's continuing, even though it's somewhat unpopular. It's because on one hand, it acts as a tool of white supremacy. On another hand, it's an extremely useful way to, rig elections because, criminals in America, I think, I'm not sure if this applies to every state, but they aren't allowed to vote. So, that takes a huge chunk of the incarcerated population, which is, in America is like extremely, it's mostly people of color that are being targeted by this system, and it deprives them of their ability to respond and to affect change in their government by voting. And not only that, but the as Owen said, the prison industrial complex is extremely useful as a tool for capital. It's an extremely useful tool because, you know, you have a whole bunch of people who you don't have to pay anything to and who you can keep as labor for pretty much as long as you want by, you know, and creating new conditions and new problems that keep them in the private prisons far longer than they would have originally been sentenced, even under the, you know, draconian laws of the war on drugs. And you can have them make basically whatever you want. You know, it's an extremely useful tool. And I think one of the big ways that, you know, that we can undermine the system in America, that, you know, there's not necessarily you know, the extent of the change we need, but one of the changes that we should push for the hardest is an end for the war on drugs.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a long conversation. So it was much fill in the dead air, so we say something.
Yeah.
But now I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Which is not a bad thing to do, thinking.
Yeah. It's, yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting about how we were talking about critic. There was a huge discussion about the French Revolution in the chat.
Oh, yes. I have noticed a bit of that, but I haven't noticed it in while talking.
It's always good to know when our little you know, random thoughts are sparking far more in-depth conversations. It's always interesting to see. But something else I wanted to kind of talk about is how the left can respond to the, you know, the massive success of fascism. You know, it on one hand, I think it's done there has been somewhat of a counter response in that many people who used to be, you know, liberal leaning or more social democrats have radicalized and moved more to the left in order to, you know, in response to this rise of fascism. But I wonder, you know, if there couldn't be some way to counteract it, because, you know, obviously we need to abolish capitalism, but we also need popular support in order to do so. And I suppose that's my question to the four of you. How do we gain popular support?
That's the question.
Word of mouth is one good one. A fierce, firm approach to any kind of, you know, bigotry and injustice, refusing to toe the line of, you know, supposed civility or, you know, the comfort of you know, liberal discourse. Yeah, so for instance,
a clear list of political ideas and also doing the math about how much it would cost would help defend you from a lot of shitty arguments and attacks the liberals will make against you.
Yeah, but how will we pay for it?
I want to live in a post-cost society where it's like money is not the thing that's preventing us from, like,
although that is, I think, a bit of a stretch goal.
Yeah.
Pragmatism. So, you know, utilizing, obviously, like, we can recognize that the tools of society are flawed whilst also still using them to our advantage. You know, violence, counter violence, especially against the far right.
Direct action.
Yeah, exactly. You know, just community outreach, you know, helping. What did you say, Lapis? Sorry?
I said it won't get me demonetized. Not that I monetize any of my videos.
Community outreach is one. You know, just ensuring that at, you know, either local councils, you know, worker unions, demonstrations, any real like public forum, really, we're, you know, putting about our ideas, ensuring every opportunity we're, you know, inputting these ideas, we're stomping out the, you know, the, you know, negative ones. We're using our voices at any opportunity to, you know, get change. And in the event of injustice, we're doing what we can to speak out, because people as a group have more power than just cruel individuals.
Yeah,
Um,
of course.
and really, all of that can be done by every one of us. We don't have to do. We don't have to like literally become Che Guevara and start like gunning down fascists and stuff. But
Matt would be down to go to that party. But
we can all do small things as as individual left-wing people that can improve things as a whole. Just by starting small conversations, just by using your voice to stomp out negative things.
Well, like if you social media has been an immense boon for organizing. Like if you actually pay attention, there's tons of events by all sorts of local groups probably going around in your area. And if you just spend the time to search for them, you'll find that there's a lot of ways that you can have impacts, even in smaller areas. And working and building these communities is the first step to a broader alternative to a system which seeks to atomize everyone and turn them all into like these isolated individuals that can be used as cogs in the machine.
After all,
I subscribe to a local anti-fascist organization in my country.
After all, Tip O'Neill said that the local is political, and local politicians actually have like the most effect on like your daily lives as opposed to like your congressman, your senator, or the president and stuff like that. So we should voting is one thing. So all you Americans and everyone else around the world, if you vote early, vote often, but we should do more than voting and like find out who is our state's representatives or our local representatives. What's their positions? Do you agree with them on this and this? And then if you agree with them on positions, you encourage them to continue to speak about like on women's issues or LGBT issues or stuff like that, because it does help them to hear that like, oh, me taking this position is something my constituents want. So force those positive positions, but then also at least start a conversation with like with some things that like I like to like give rid of rent if we can, or like have like strong unions or a strong, robust universal healthcare and or a universal basic income and stuff like that. I think it's like sometimes the most radical thing you can do: talk to your neighbor, talk to your coworker. Whenever it's almost like an automatic thing that when one of the coworkers says, "How are you doing, Jonathan?" I just go, "I'm still thinking about how to bring about the socialist, communist, workers' revolution." So it does start some conversation where like I can see why you like have a problem with capitalism. That makes sense.
I definitely agree. Conversation, voting, direct action, firm stances against abuse.
There's one. I mean, I'm not sure how this opinion's going to go down, but it's something that's been that I've been thinking in my head all year long.
Okay.
We often talk about this sort of pipeline to the far right. So kind of like a chain of people like that. I think we've got to start thinking about it, like to reverse that flow and to think, okay, like can we identify people who may have like a pipeline that leads to left-wing ideas? I know that S-Man doesn't really want. I know that he kind of resents that label a little bit. Of a lot of people have questioned, saying, "Oh, you're on the left," and I know that he sort of took exception to that. But sometimes, if I was to listen to him for the first time, and I was like I was a right winger or whatever, like I'd be encouraged. Like just the way he talks is very eloquent.
Who's this? Sorry, Wolf?
S-Man.
Talking about S-Man.
I'd be
for anyone who's not clued in on my audience, he's a self-identified right libertarian YouTuber. However, I'd have to say I'm not especially comfortable talking about someone behind their back. Save that. We can put a pin in that, and we'll talk about it another time. Because I'm sure there's quite a lot of insight there. But I would like to go into your idea about reversing the alt-right pipeline, because I definitely do agree that, everyone's like, oh, look at all these tools that the alt-right is using to radicalize young people online. Great. when can we start doing that?
Yeah.
Because
So can you identify people who? I mean, it seems like a strange idea, but are there people who may because often we identify people as saying, oh, that person's a pipeline to the right, but then we sort of think we might need to engage with that person, saying, can you be a bit more of a draw a few more people like towards our side a little bit more, and then just so we can have the idea of having a pipeline. It could.
ContraPoints would be a good left-wing alternative to that, because she is. I don't necessarily know where she fits in herself. She just does kind of identify as a leftist. But the way that she presents her arguments are quite accessible to right-wing and centrist people. And they do a good job of bringing people into a, kind of making them see, okay, maybe there's something to liberal ideas. And then you go into some of the more radical people online, often like what's his face, Libertarian Socialist Rants, I think.
Cameron,
far left.
He was the first left-wing person I actually.
But sometimes I think that the left sabotages that somewhat by being a bit too afraid and insular.
There's that
in its spaces. They're hesitant to embrace people who are moving in a better direction. Too quick to condemn and witch hunt, and just kind of kick them out and be like, you were bad once, you are forever bad. I will never associate with you. Never, never, never. No matter how much you try to change, you are not welcome in these spaces. I'm so much purer than now and have never had any negative thoughts or any problematic opinions whatsoever.
It's pretty much logical to be wary of people with shady past.
This was actually what you're touching on, Lapras, is like Ian Daisuke of In Utero Studios did bring that up in like the Ship of Theseus in the alt-right playbook, where unfortunately it is just as a thing that we should be conscious of. The left have a tendency or almost a paranoid fear of being burned. So that's why the left can sometimes act like that. But back to the pipeline from the center to the left, no, that's definitely a phenomenon that Peter Coffin has noticed, because he has noticed some of his new patrons who are the other people that they're patrons of. They start with like Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talks. People can have their opinions of like Kyle Kulinski, but he is like more left than like a center or right. I agree.
Or maybe like a David Pakman.
Yes, David Pakman is also good. Sam Cedar of the Majority Report, those are also good entry points because they're like American Democrats. And so, but then they can like David Pakman had Peter Coffin, and maybe Peter Coffin it would like do a stream with like Permanent Matt let us know that he was like that's fine. And Peter Coffin would have like a hangout with like Christianity or American Anarchy or like other people, and that can drive them further right. Ollie from Philosophy Tube has also noticed that people subscribe to like Jennifer Mickles or something like that, who is friends with Lindsay Ellis, so they sub to Lindsay Ellis. Lindsay Ellis like had ContraPoints on one of her videos. Points, and sub to Ollie, and then sub to Peter Coffin, and so
and the continues. Yes, we're drawing people in. No, that has to be accepted. Unfortunately, I think the left. Here's my kind of controversial take. I think that the left's ideas are good, and I think if we push, strongly for these ideas and advocate for them forcefully and with factual backing, then I think the left will win. Even if we follow the belief system of dialectical materialism, just based on the contradictions in our society, the leftist alternative is bound to eventually emerge victorious. The question is of when, and for the majority of people on Earth, the sooner the better.
In the next 12 years or sooner.
Yeah. But I have to say,
sorry to interrupt, Lapis. it's quite late in the UK. I'm actually probably going to go in a second because I'm quite tired. But
Understandable.
nothing against the stream or anything. I just am a little bit.
Oh, no. Sleep well, Owen. Your presence is, much enjoyed. Thank you very much.
Thanks again, Lapis, and congratulations on 200.
Well, thank you so much. You're a big part of it.
When did you overtake me, Lapis? Because I was like, I'm at 180. So somewhere along the line, you overtook me.
I think it was this month.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I
okay.
had a big boost because a bunch of my tweets got really popular. I had 2 that got over 1,000 likes in early October.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly, I was a bit surprised because I'm not used to having any level of attention whatsoever. Like, I follow a ton of people, but I didn't actually think, like, this was October and September too, were the first times I think people actually started to follow me, not just because I followed them, but because they were interested in what I was saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I like being on the left. I am extremely left-wing in pretty much all my positions. I enjoy advocating, left-wing ideas. I enjoy living a life based on, these principles. And I think that, when I see these principles put into practice, they've done a ton of good. And, I'm just really eager to keep sharing this message with the world. And I'm really grateful that I finally have people who are listening to me. But one problem I'm really worried about is that I think people will dislike me or begin to dislike me when they hear some of my criticisms of the left, because I don't think they want to be criticized.
I'm in the same position.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily, I agree with pretty much all the ideas. The problem is how the ideas are advocated. I think that there needs to be a lot more introspection about the very kind of like, I hate to say it, but self-righteous tone. It's just over and over and over again. We hear denunciations of all the other ways of thinking in the world. Okay, great, how wonderful. And, we hear denunciations about comparatively minor things. Great. How exactly is this supposed to draw more people into our way of thinking? How is this exactly supposed to convince people that we have their best priorities at heart when our priorities seem to be kind of chasing like these niche cultural issues? Like, how many gay characters are in a movie? Like, I representation is important, don't get me wrong. But there seems to be a certain, like, there's a lot of emotion around this issue that I really wish was elsewhere, on class issues, on race issues. I really wish that the emotion that a lot of these accounts on Twitter seem to be able to summon for, did this gay ship turn out? I wish that emotion was there for all these other struggles.
That may be something of where it's just like, we know that these are important things to talk about, but knowing of how important these things are to talk about, it's already, they have in their minds in that kind of field of the really important issues we must concern ourselves. It's already drained right there. But if I put my mind into like movies and stuff like that as a form of self-care and stuff like that, then it's a low risk kind of like field to talk about or to get my emotions up about, which is just like right now, just off the top of my head or around my ass or both, which is an interesting analogy to think about. And so I'm just like spitballing here. So that may be why some people would be focused on movies, which is a first world problem, like representation and stuff like that. This first world problem as opposed to the real issues, because
yeah, I can definitely see how that sort of way of thinking can get hijacked by the anti-SJWs. But like, are they wrong though about this one particular, like, I don't know. And there's other things where it's like, when educating people, or educating, quote unquote, people about bigotry, is the best thing to do necessarily to jump down their throat and immediately call them garbage, right-wing, evil, trash? Is that helpful? Who is that actually helping here? Because to me, it seems like a lot of that.
I mean, it depends on the person, because I think that I think Lapis, because I think you and I think that I think we've changed a lot of minds, like between ourselves. Maybe not even changed minds, but at least we've challenged preconceived ideas, because it's like, it's not where, I mean, I'm guilty of engaging in too much respectability politics when I sort of advocate for my position, because obviously as a non-binary sort of person, then obviously I'm going to try to convince people that gender is a complicated thing. So I've used a lot of respectability politics to sort of convince people who are on the right of me to sort of rethink what their stance is. Sometimes, I mean, I brought up a lot of good points towards them that and steered the conversation in sort of a different direction that they would have thought. And at least it's good that people can at least rethink like some of their positions, or at least even engage in the idea is a good thing for me. But maybe because I mean, politically, I'm very much aligned with the left. So there's a lot of like in terms of like the work. But then in the social spheres of YouTube, it's sort of a mixed bag. There's always like a lot of people who might be towards the center right or libertarian. So maybe that's why I've been trained to sort of to temper some of the ways in which I talk about things like if I discuss sort of asexuality or like or whatever I'm going through, that's why I may temper myself a little bit. But
like due to the nature of your audience, you have to kind of adjust.
Due to the nature of the audience, I just have to adjust the content a little bit.
Yeah. On the other hand, though, I think that there was parts of me where I was being a bit too, hesitant to voice what I was really saying and be firm. Like there was that whole incident with Brandon.
Oh yeah.
Where he reported this girl's account because he was so offended that she had used the word man genocide, that she had said man genocide, please, when this guy was like, if you ever want to be with me, you should stop being it's too gross even to repeat it. I didn't even put a warning, so I don't really want to subject the audience to it. Like it was a really, really nasty statement that caused her to say that. And it's an obvious joke. And he went and reported her account and got it deleted, which is, the main source of how she makes her income. And then he comes on in my Twitter and it's like, haha, I got that whore's account deleted. Like, I'm sorry. I think like if I had, had a bit more of a backbone and really stood up to him, firmly about how he was treating her earlier, about how he was, going on this nasty tirade about how the only reason she didn't like capitalism and the only reason she was struggling is because she hadn't had a plan. It was her own fault, blah, blah, personal responsibility. Mommy and daddy won't take care of you. Like none of this, no effort at all to empathize with the situation, no effort at all to understand that, sometimes things just don't work out in life. Sometimes, the best laid plans completely collapse. None of that, no empathy whatsoever, just full on hate and judgment. And
yeah, because admittedly, because when I sort of spoke to Brendan, because a couple of those tweets was sort of like I just said to him, look, life is very complicated. Like you can, I mean, if it went like that, like if you planned well, you worked hard and you succeeded, then everyone would be okay. Like, but unfortunately, yes, you can make plans and you can do that great, but there are so many unpredictable things that can happen, and maybe with a bit more life experience, you'll sort of realize that. And so admittedly, I think he said, yeah, that was a bit of a shit take that I had.
Yeah, like it was just, I don't know. I felt like maybe if I had been a bit more firm, then that could have been avoided.
Yeah, because I had a problem with that. It wasn't us. I'm a bit more assertive with my opinions, a little bit more in certain streams, because I don't know. I think it's a tipping point I think the tipping point for me was, I hate to bring this up, Lapis, but it was in that sort of Gemini situation. There might have been a moment where I kind of that was kind of my snapping point where I was like, okay, I've got to speak, otherwise people are just gonna think that I'm just sort of like a pushover.
Yeah, for those of you who are watching and are completely baffled by what we're talking about, Gemini is this big anti-SJW YouTuber, and they managed to get him on one of the smaller anti-SJW streams. I was on that stream, and when he found out that I was trans, he started asking me if I had a dick. And he asked it over and over and over again, even though I said that I was uncomfortable with the question and I didn't want to answer it. And he kept asking over and over and over, and eventually I just said yes and hoped that it would please him. And then he got offended when people were like, you're acting really like a jerk.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the problem. I mean, I was, there were people in our circles. So sorry, I shouldn't be naming all these obscure names. It's not a good.
We haven't really, so it's fine if you just like not name names, but yeah.
Yeah, the idea that's yeah, I'll do better next time. But what was I saying? Yes, like the idea that people would say, and we weren't using a particular language, like we weren't saying, you're a transphobe or whatever. We were saying,
right.
We were saying,
you were saying that's not cool.
I just said you're being fucking rude. You're asking intrusive questions. Don't be fucking rude. And then they come back saying, "Oh, you're an SJW," and that's why some of us, in the circles that I hang around with, like they might have a different political ideology than me, but they've just gotten sick of the whole genre of anti-SJW type. They've seen a certain vacuousness in that.
Well, I mean, you can never. It's impossible to really have a substance to what you say and what you believe when it's all based around opposing a straw man of someone else's beliefs.
I think we're one thing I guess I can do if I have the time to do that. If I happen to be able to get access to these links and go into these like far right streams and stuff like that, then I can be that one feminist that they don't often talk to, and they would have like they say, oh, feminists do this and feminists do that, and I could pipe up and say, well, I'm a feminist. And have you heard me say that? And I don't agree with that statement. Like that. That's something I could do. But then I could also be the one leftist or SJW, I hate that term in a way, or the one feminist in like a group of 6. And that's, I don't know. There's definitely like times where it's like I can do that, but like it is also not for everyone as well. So.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a lot of off-air conversations that I do have with a lot of people, and
yeah,
I remember there was a good friend of mine. He doesn't really have a political ideology. He's more on I guess more of a centrist or whatever. Yeah. But then he was starting to say, maybe this idea of toxic masculinity or whatever, and I use those words, even though I'm not really a feminist. Like there's still a lot of some of those words do have a lot of stock, like the idea of rape culture or toxic masculinity, or sometimes I might introduce the idea of patriarchy by using a concept like a sub-patriarchy, saying, this particular school here, is kind of like a little sub-patriarchy because it's very much masculinized or whatever. And if you think of like little units of, so if you've got a large overarching concept and then you've got these little parts of it, you can point out specifically. And
no, that's definitely a good strategy, highlighting like specific injustices, because too often, when we throw out like these grandiose terms like white supremacy, patriarchy, or especially like cis hetero-patriarchy, capitalism, people are like a bit baffled because it seems like we've entered like this academic world with all these, confusing constructs and concepts that people are just not used to talking about. But when you point to a specific instance, a specific injustice, it can really help highlight your argument and make it that much stronger. And of course, don't rely on anecdotal evidence, produce a systemic analysis, but it is important to have the ability to pinpoint the problem.
Yeah, because that's why, I mean, it's not the standard practice to use, and you're sort of taking a lot of creative license in sort of rejigging terms and breaking things up into smaller things, saying, these are sort of sub-patriarchies or whatever, because there's some parts of society, or maybe even schools or institutions, that are more egalitarian than others. So that's why I might look at certain micro scales, even though it is important to look at the big system or whatever. But sometimes, just in conversations, to point out sub things, or if you talk about the concept of rape culture, which I agreed with Christy Winters. She made a very good point about the danger to male victims of like male survivors of sexual assault, to sort of dismiss the idea, because with the Catholic Church, etc. So when I talk about it on my channel, it's geared towards a lot of male victims. I may use the word subculture of rape, just to say that, because they kind of they look very indifferent. Like, each one's very insidious, but they come in sort of a different form sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I know now to pick up on something that like you and like Wolf has said, that is a fair criticism actually of like the left. We use way too much like academic language and stuff like that, and so when people hear toxic masculinity, and if they don't know about the world, they may like Google search it, and sometimes the first result they get is like a Barian video or a Soricon video, and so we have to fight against misinformation about that. Which is why actually I think Thoughtsline, for his anarchy Q&A videos, which has radicalized me to be an anarchist, by the way, tries to like break down and use simple words in order to like communicate effectively towards the audience, and we need that kind of like introduction to like these concepts.
Albeit I'm kind of a bad person for that message, because I am somewhat of a self-indulgent academic. I love to use like long, complicated words. I don't know why. It's fun.
I mean, honestly, I would repeat a word I heard, and then when someone says, "Oh, wait a minute, how do you? What's the definition of that word?" It's like, I think of a definition. Here's an example of how I use the word parody when I'm talking about like core parody and Magic the Gathering. The baseball of Magic the Gathering, a game I play. A high thinking but low physical effort game. Anyway, back to an earlier conversation you and I had.
That's sort of what because maybe I could pretend, because I didn't really think of myself when I talked about these as sort of pipelines towards the left. Like, even though I'm in a hangout and we're sort of, I mean, we may have a few differences of opinion, but we're all sort of entrenched sort of in the left. Whereas
this is our far left SJW.
When I present myself on my channel for what I want people to watch, I can see a potential that, I'm sort of taking an approach where I've kind of altered some of the words a little bit, and I guess used a less academic sort of language and tried to approach it pragmatically. And so maybe like potentially people might see me and think, okay, maybe you're correct about like this sort of thing, which is mostly an idea that comes from the left.
Sometimes we do need to like meet people where they are, not just like on social justice issues and stuff like that. Like for me, when I talk about capitalism or something like that, and like not just like today, but last month is kind of interesting, where I was on the Seaside Patreon Hangout, and two of the patrons, who I'm friendly with because they're cool dudes as well, and I'll easily buy them beer. But someone said, quoting the Beatles songs, "So you want a revolution?" Well, and I screamed, "Yes, I do," because I had it. And that started the conversation. But at the end of the day, we'll still buy each other beers and stuff like that. But I sometimes gotta like recognize of like how I'm talking about like capitalism against some people who might see themselves as capitalists or stuff like that, and how I gotta be careful is like trying to not to like make it sound like they're to blame for being a capitalist and exploiting the workers. I gotta explain to them it's the system that is exploiting the workers, and we gotta do that. Like for like Steve Jobs' audience, they all understand the big major businesses like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and all those people who are hoarding all those monies. Yeah, that is the problem. They just think the solution is reforming the system we currently have.
Yeah, kind of like let's tax the rich a bit more and like redistribute a bit. Like, no, it needs to be a change in ownership.
Exactly.
I mean, even pointing to any particular individual person. I mean, even like as horrible as Trump is, like that presidency couldn't end sooner enough. But unfortunately, he is a symptom of a disease. It's like,
agreed.
I don't want to be vulgar, but he's like the discharge he's like the discharge, but then the bigger
Yeah.
is there's a genital that's been infested by STI. So
A very Australian metaphor.
yeah.
I mean, like just like in the handy fascism checklist that I read off before, we'll see. Oh, disdain for intellects and in the arts. That's not the Trump thing. That's a Republican thing, and a lot of these check marks you can find just on like right wing party.
And like a lot of the check marks were actually like pushed by like Democrats as well.
Exactly, which is also can be a problem too. So yeah,
like that's the difficult thing, on one hand, we have to fight against this urgent threat of fascism. On the other hand, we have to recognize that the alternative being presented in the Democrats is really, really lackluster at best. And we need to push the Democrats in a better direction and, as a result, push America in a better direction. And
I mean, socialism is like already gaining ground as like a loose idea that like the young people, millennials, and the next generation are interested in engaging with. Because remember, one senator from like Vermont or some northeastern state just put it out on poll, which like social economic systems do you want our country to pursue and stuff like that. And he just randomly put up social in there because it, like the other two was like capitalism and fascism, and social was the most popular results. And reading the thread there is kind of interesting. He's an American. He's like in his 50s, and I know I shouldn't generalize, but he always brings up like USSR or China as examples of social.
China.
Yeah, and that also came up in like the Siege Guys Patreon hangout as well. And that sometimes is a lot to go through. Where okay, I can't talk to you about Marxist, yes, because your idea of socialism is USSR. Okay, I have to like go through all of this to try to like so that we can maybe get on the same page of what is socialism and what is capitalism. And sometimes when we have different ideas of those things, as well as like any social justice issues, or even when people do not think there is systematic oppression of any kind, whether on class, race, gender, or whatsoever, then it's just like it's sometimes difficult to have that conversation and stuff like that. Which is why just not having the conversation, but instead talking about those issues without talking about people, just talk about the issues, present those ideas. When people are ready to like maybe have when their minds have already changed and actually want to like engage in these arguments in good faith.
Step by step.
Exactly. Then we can have the place where it's like, okay, you want to learn about anarchism? Here's the anarchist libraries, or here's the Bread book, The Conquest of Bread with Peter Spohn. To be fair, I'm dyslexic, so I got plenty of books I should read, but I haven't. So I listen to audiobooks, but other mediums is good. It should be able to convey.
Oh yeah, definitely. Make leftism inclusive. Definitely.
Yes.
I actually I read a feminist book.
Wow.
I've never read one before. It was an Australian author, Clementine Ford. It's called Boys Will Be Boys. It's actually, I enjoyed it for the most part. There's probably one or two chapters that I sort of thought, yeah, I'm not really on the same page. But then some of it was very empathic, because I think the idea that inspired that was because she has a son and she's thinking, okay, what's this world going to be like? Where we make excuses for the whole excuse of, boys will be boys or whatever. And it's like, we don't sort of challenge, the underlying thing like that. So she's sort of thinking, what's the world going to be like? Like for my son, will he have all the options that he has to be? And I could sort of relate to that, because when you're sort of born into asexuality or whatever, from the beginning, you're already in direct confrontation with traditional roles that are being put out for you. So
yeah,
I was smashing through cucumbers from a very early age. So I could kind of relate to this particular book, but it's sort of one of those things. If anyone else has read that book, it's almost like I think I'd love to do a stream where I do like a book club type thing.
Oh yeah, that'd be fun. We could all start a book club. Actually, that's a great idea.
Well,
what's the book's name? I'll write it down and I'll read it. I'll take it out from my university library. And
it's called Boys Will Be Boys.
Okay.
By Clementine Ford. Clementine Ford.
Oh.
A lot of people don't like her because she's sort of one of those, she does a little bit of trolling online. She sort of does these jokes like the, kill all men or whatever as a kind of troll for the detractors. She's very, very confrontational, but
Hmm.
I think what I liked about this book was that it was absolutely, it's kind of on the very, very cusp of contemporary culture. She seems to have her finger on the pulse of all of the memes and all of the names and all of the hashtags. So it's kind of like a very much contemporary book.
So it's not like some sort of academic seminar, like
Not really. It uses
reflections on hegemonic constellations.
Yeah, it's a very casual sort of style. Like she even uses a lot of swear words, because she's an Australian author. Of course, we have to use our swear words now.
Like every sentence almost, right? That's probably the one book where I'm going to read the most frequent use of the C word.
Yeah, but it's one of those books that's got the ethos, logos, but then the pathos is really good as well, and that's the importance of having emotion in argument. I don't get the idea of saying, oh, we're not allowed to have emotionality. We have to have strict logic. I always thought that didn't people say that to have a good pitch you have to say the three what is the three things? The ethos, logos, and pathos.
Yeah,
are the three parts of a good speech.
Well, yeah, definitely. Like a lot of people deny the role that emotion plays in persuading them. Like,
Yeah,
it makes them feel better about themselves, but it's ultimately dishonest. Emotion is extremely influential. Like politicians, when they're trying to convince people, do they like pull up like the census from the other year and start reading off statistics and then providing factual solutions to what they're going to do for each and every problem in the country? Or do they provide speeches filled with rhetoric designed to influence and persuade you that they have, the nation's best interests at heart and that they will lead the country to a better place?
But Noam Chomsky knows that the reason why the right usually wins is because while the left says, listen, the problem with this issue is like blah, 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 and it's a nuanced, complicated, and not satisfactory answer, but the right has these simple, false, but true, but sounds or feels true rhetoric that speaks to the lizard brain in our heads. How do we counteract that? I don't know. And also, people just have this when they are presented with facts that counteract what they used to believe. Like 40% of the time, it's they brains won't change.
They just dismiss the arguments. They're like, oh,
or
that's just what Soros wants you to think.
Exactly. And but also I think Casey Explosion on Twitter mentioned this, that I believe in facts over feels. That was kind of used as a counter argument to trans people's existence and stuff like that. And when I saw that, I quote tweeted that and said, you know what? I always hated that argument, facts over feels. I believe in facts over feels. Then why do you yell at me? And now I have more reasons to hate that argument as well.
Yeah, well, it
looks like irrational because I have the fedora and the mustache, like in the old Camera Guy video. You must take it back now.
Yeah, his thing of Davis Orini, I think it was.
Yes.
What a jerk!
That's a new joke. Because I got a friend of mine who's like a sort of reform. I think she used to be a bit of a troll, but now she's she's firmly on the left. And I shared this meme with her. It's this really, really cringy pickup line. It's like a Valentine's card day with Ben Shapiro on it, and it says, "Facts don't care about your feelings, but I do." And then this is what she said. She said, "Okay, you've turned me drier than a desert."
I mean, honestly, Ben Shapiro, I'm surprised he has a wife. I think it was an arranged marriage.
It could have been.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think I'm going to call it a night. But thank you very much for you two for sticking it out. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. I will put the links to everyone's channel in the description. And once again, I just thank you so much for giving me a small platform. It's more than I deserve.
Lapras, thank you for you existing, you talking to the world, and for your friendship as well, and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And to you.
And thank you for having my furry butt on this channel.
Oh, anytime.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Ta-ta for now.
Bye.